Just before we start, I wanted to apologize for the bad audio on my microphone last week. Our equipment is on its last legs. Some of it is starting to break a little bit. We've managed to fix the wire in a position where it seems to sound like it's supposed to. But sorry if it does that again.
Very strange that I have a large nose, and I'll tell you why.
I guess you're privileged to have a big nose then, because you don't live in harsh conditions.
The habanero one? Holy fuck, dude. Woo! You know, maybe I've been treating this bike as some sort of parkour bike when really it's just a...
I once came face to face with a wild rhinoceros. That was pretty crazy.
I got stung by a bee once.
I'm always a little scared of when you introduce it.
Why?
Because it's loud.
Get the energy up.
I'm ready.
Then I'll do the opposite.
Be super calm. First,
Welcome back to Burning Boat Business. Topic number 1 for today.
It's summer outside. Having the first cold brew of the season.
Apparently.
It's like 3 degrees warmer than normal. So I thought it's time. Summer's here.
Summer's not here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Summer's not
it's
here.
It's wishful thinking.
Point number 1.
Point number 1. Okay.
I had a friend. I don't want to call him out because it wasn't meant with any malicious intent.
No.
But I had a friend.
Who is this friend?
Well, I just had a...
I'm joking.
Just kind of brought up, like, you know, he had shown the podcast to his dad.
Yeah.
And his dad was like,
what's the point?
What's the point of this?
What's the point of these
and
guys?
He said, well, yeah, Taylor, what is the point?
And then he was like, he didn't have an answer. So then he was like, what is the point?
Yeah.
And then you were like, what's the point?
I don't know.
And so
or just
here we are. What is the point of this podcast?
It's
a good
an
question.
alien landed on Earth and was like, you know, why are you guys... First of all, what is the point?
Yeah.
And why the hell would people listen to us talk?
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know.
And I said, I don't have a good answer for that.
I think there's... Because when you asked me, my first thought was, I don't think there's a point, like a specific point yet. But I think that what we're doing is we're practicing what a podcast is like.
Yeah.
For in case we ever have anything that's actually interesting to talk about. And
but
so
for
it's
now,
like you got to start before it actually is something. It's like start now and then get good at it or figure out what you're going to actually talk about once you've done it a little bit.
Right.
And so it's like a trial run. It's like we're doing it and maybe one day we'll be like, oh, I'm so glad that we have this and now we can actually use it for something.
That's
important.
Yeah.
Or something that has a point.
Yeah.
But I mean, loosely, I guess the point is to talk about business, but we don't really do that.
We don't. And the question was also like, you know, what do we have to offer that would make somebody sit down and listen?
Again, I think it's more for us.
Yeah, that's what I said.
It's like we like doing it and we like having a record of things we've talked about. It's almost like a little diary. We can look back. What were we doing in week 2 of starting the company?
Exactly.
But then I think, with the idea that maybe it could be interesting one day.
Yeah.
Or maybe we do have something. Maybe we've started a business from scratch.
Yep.
And we've documented it.
Yep.
That might be interesting when we've actually got something that people will be like, how did you do that? Or like, how does that work?
Listen
or where
to
did you start
50 hours of this podcast.
Yeah,
okay?
we'll be like, well, actually, here it is.
Yeah.
50 hours. I mean, we're almost at 50 hours, if not at 50 hours.
36. Oh, yeah, I guess if they're longer then.
So I don't think at 50 there'll be anything like, here it is.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this would still be something that is just, it's interesting for us to do. I enjoy doing it, and it gets me, I think, clearer on what I think and what I feel about certain things.
Yes.
Something I think we can do more of, and is what we're starting to do more of, is talking about. Like,
hey, stop reading my notes.
I'm not. I can't read. I'm looking in this general direction. Is to talk about more like serious topics.
Yes.
Like we started to.
I think
and have some more like opinions and like have to force ourselves to explain them.
Yeah.
And also maybe say some stuff that we don't actually know if we mean, and then on the next podcast be like, hang on.
Yeah. I totally agree.
I was wrong.
I totally agree. But the thing that came out of it, I said, you know what? Maybe we can be a little bit more
Specific?
or just not ramble quite as,
I think you're right.
you know, it was based on last week's episode. And he said, well, there's a point where it just felt like you guys were just rambling. And I said, yeah, totally.
My fault. I apologize for
No,
the
not
bad
your
notes.
fault. Just I think we do it where it's kind of, we take conversations maybe just a little bit too far.
We get too comfortable, maybe.
That's the thing.
That's what I meant by I like it
too
when we
comfortable.
had some stuff where it was like, ooh,
Yeah.
okay,
Exactly.
that's a topic that's a little more
Exactly.
tough to talk about, but also obviously more interesting.
So here's what I think we should do. We should, like you said, talk about more serious things.
Yeah.
Which opens up the risk of,
Yeah.
you know, tarnishing our
Criticism.
names.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking that maybe we've come to the end of this format where I do an episode and you do an episode. And why not every episode come in together?
Ooh.
So that it's more of a
We've thought about it a little more.
dialogue
Yeah.
a little bit, and you can just have a list of points and
Yeah.
you can just, oh, you're done with your point, here comes the next one. So it feels a little bit less like
Yeah.
just a conversation that kind of is
Yeah.
trailing off, you know.
That's an interesting idea.
I would just wonder what that would do to the sort of pace of it all, or the, you know, oh, I want to talk about this weekend, you want to talk about this, and then we can just see how those two fit together.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, so what we do is we maybe come up with an overall topic of discussion and then maybe talk about the podcast before doing the podcast.
Yeah, or just do the exact same thing, except I would come in with half of the amount of points.
Ooh.
Do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So it would still maybe be every week someone kicks it off.
Or someone is
Right.
responsible for the actual introduction.
Right, something.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just goes, you know, to whatever you want to talk about. And the first thing would hopefully be something to do with the business, and then it can kind of go anywhere after that,
Yeah.
you know?
I think to maybe answer the question a little more seriously, what's the point, or what do we actually have to offer? I think not that we're by any means the best at any of the things I'm about to say, but
Yeah.
I think the things that we do know a little bit about are, you know, like filmmaking,
Right.
and what it's like to make your first feature film, or what it's like to start to be in the startup part of a company, which is, it's like a little backwards, because normally you'd think that, well, you'd want to hear someone who's actually kind of done it,
Yeah.
not who's in it.
Yeah.
But I think, again, this idea of hindsight, it's interesting to capture now. It's not a great answer,
Yeah. No, it is.
but it's like, we can't make up anything. We can't say,
No.
well, the reason why we were able
Right.
to get our first 10 clients were because we did this and this and this. It's like, in hindsight, that might feel like that's the reason, but I
Right.
feel like right now we're a lot more aware of what we're
What it
doing, or what
actually
we're
is.
thinking will work,
Yeah.
and then what doesn't.
Yeah.
So obviously the hindsight thing is super important, because it lets you look at the actual results and not just
Yeah.
the thought process. But
Yeah.
I think it keeps us honest.
Yeah. And I think all that's good. It's just, you know, we also don't have all the things that I would say make other podcasts more interesting are things we just don't do.
Like what?
We don't really, like, let's say, talk about current events. We don't
No, we don't.
show video clips. We
That's
don't have guests on.
Also something we want to try and do more of.
Yeah, it's just like these little things that might just pep it up a little.
Yeah.
But then I also don't give a shit, because it's like, you know, for me, I said to my friend, I said, well, I think we're doing the podcast more for ourselves than anybody else. If nobody listened, I think we would still
Yeah.
sit here and talk
Maybe.
and do the podcast.
I think so.
It's not like,
But I think it's important to keep in mind the people who are actually listening, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good reason for continuing to do it no matter what. But
yeah,
let's try and talk about some more
just push it a
serious
little.
things. Yeah, let's get a little uncomfortable.
Let's get a little uncomfortable. Let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So let's start it off
Okay.
let's just talk about this interview you wanted to talk about. So, just to quickly set it up, I have been and will be filming you. What would you say, sort of through your... I guess right now it would be through the transition of your child being born.
Yeah.
A sort of documentary on you, I guess.
Yeah. And again, I guess the question is, well, what's so interesting about me and what I'm doing? So,
right, which I asked you pretty blatantly.
We wanted to do it. Yeah.
I was like, why?
Why? Yeah. I think, again, it stems from a place of, well, I want to do it for myself anyways.
Right.
And that it might just be interesting down the road. Mm-hmm. Like, it might just have been worth getting all this content now.
Yeah.
In case there's something actually interesting that's worth putting out there in the future.
Yeah.
And that it's for so many reasons. I think the main one at the moment is the accountability thing, is just having talked about what I want to do, how I want to be, who I want to be, how I want to think.
Right.
It kind of just makes me think about it more. I mean, it sounds basic and simple, and you might say, well, why don't you just do those things? But for me, it really works to just put it out there and talk to someone else about it, and even talk about showing this stuff to like a bunch of people in the form of an actual film.
Yeah.
But yeah, it suddenly takes it from, it's just something I'm thinking about in my head. Or it'd be cool to maybe document what it feels like to go from no child to a child.
Yeah.
And have some thoughts about what that means.
Right.
To, we're actually like sitting and talking about it. It's like a real thing. Like it's actually going to be filmed. And suddenly you realize that you don't have all the answers to the questions that you're being asked, valid questions. And it's like, I think it's a good thing, because it forces you to think about, well, what's the actual interesting part of this?
Right.
Kind of like writing a script.
You have to have an ego a little bit, because
everyone.
Otherwise, a little bit even with the podcast or making any film, you're saying like, I have something to say.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth saying. Otherwise, I wouldn't be fucking making a film about it.
I think I have
but
something
isn't everybody
important
like
to
that
say,
a little bit? Yeah.
And I'm saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
I
don't find there to be anything wrong with that.
No,
I think
because
as long as it's as long as you can be really honest about it and actually say what you feel.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Even if you come across as being delusional or something, that at least the person appears to actually feel that way.
Right.
And that's something you can relate to.
Right.
On one level or another. Ideally, it would be more than just, he seems to be genuine, but he's out of his mind or whatever. It's I can relate to what he's talking about or what he's feeling. Or I hadn't thought of that way before, and I'm glad I happened to see this. Not that other people aren't saying stuff similar to what I'm saying. And I don't even know what I'm saying. I keep saying...
What are you saying?
We keep talking... that was I think something that kept coming up in the interview was like, so what's the thing? And it's not really like here's the big thing that's different about me. That's not really what I think.
Okay.
I don't think there's like an answer to that question. It was more of just like I'm interested to explore it and see what... I think it's interesting to see someone else learn something.
Right.
And that stuff that is the most true is stuff that you can look at and say like, oh yeah, I kind of knew that already. But like that really makes sense the way that was presented or the way that I realized that as it was happening. It's very rare, I think, that you read something or you watch something and you're like, oh my God, I never thought of that. That's amazing. That like changes everything.
Yeah.
It's almost always a form of, like I feel like that's true already. And now I just thought about it in a different way. But I want to talk, like in the documentary, I want to talk about how I really feel like you have to live the way you, like if you're telling your child you should do this and this, and that these are good values to have, and that this is how to be a kind person, and this is how to be when you grow up, and these are the things I think are important, and I think you have to live those things and embody them fully. And I don't think there's anything weird in saying that, or like, look at me, I'm special for realizing that. But I think that sometimes people struggle to actually do that and end up saying, well, like, don't do what I did.
Right.
Do it differently.
Right.
Like, follow your dreams, do what you want to do. And I feel like I really have to show that. And I think it might be interesting to try and capture what that experience is actually like, because it's so easy to say now before there's a baby.
Yeah.
It's so much more difficult when there's actually someone there, and there's so many responsibilities and so many things that change.
Yeah.
And how couldn't it be interesting for me? And that maybe something comes out of it that I feel like would be worth sharing.
Yeah. That is a weird sort of, because I can only relate to it when someone asked me I was telling them, oh, we're shooting a behind the scenes for my film.
I feel like those two are closely connected.
Yeah. And I said, well, why
would anyone care about you making your film? Like, what makes you special?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I still have the ego that I'm like, I think it's interesting. And if I become successful, I know it will be interesting. And I know people will want to watch it. But it sounds so delusional and egotistical to be like, oh, just wait 20 years.
Film about me and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's hard for it not to sound a little bit pretentious.
But you know what it also is? It's the for me, it's like that movie, it's so hard to remember in this stressful situation.
Your film, like
that.
Behind the scenes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we watch the footage now, and I'm like,
oh yeah.
Totally like, whoa, completely forgot about that. So I think it's equally for myself as it is for others. But if you right now say, well, why do you think you're so important? Or why do you think people would care?
It could be. Key word there.
Yeah.
It could be interesting. Right. And it's like,
but that's why I asked you.
So why do it? Is because it could be. There could be something there. And I feel like if there's something that interests you and that you feel driven to do, and there could be the potential for it to be interesting for other people, like, that's a good enough reason to put some time and effort into it.
Or just see what I think that's all you can do, is see what happens. But I think that's why I came to you with the question of, like, why? Because it's even more like, at least mine was, oh, I'm making a movie, which is something not very many people do. So there's a bit of a niche.
Yeah.
So then when it came to you, it was like, well, who the fuck cares about somebody having a child? Something that literally
everyone
on this planet is going to do at some point. Then it becomes, well, what do you focus on? Or what do you... And I think the answer is, well, you don't know. You just wait and see.
Right. But I think I can answer that question a little bit in like, I think right now in the world that we live in, it's considered, it's socially acceptable and kind of encouraged to be really career focused, between the ages of 20 and 35, and that you kind of have kids later on. Yeah. It's becoming more and more normal for people to have kids quite late. Yeah. And not getting into the fact that sometimes it gets difficult for some people to have kids because they've waited so long. I kind of feel like I don't think I want to be saying I can't do what I want to do if I have a child. I feel like it should almost be the opposite, that like, if you have a child, you should do everything you can to show them that it's good and right to do what you want to do, and that there's a way to make it work.
Right.
I think that a lot of times people think that you have a child and that means you have to sacrifice a bunch of things and kind of settle down and become not necessarily who you want to be, or you have to have at least worked up to a point, and then you're like, you can hold over until they're old enough to become their own person. But that I want to say, like, and again, I don't know what I'm going to want when it actually happens, but I feel like I just find that there's something wrong there a little bit. It's
But
like,
that's what
I
we
wanna,
got at with the interview, I think, was saying, well, what do you think now?
yeah,
Because now you can say, before the child's come, all the stuff that you're like, this is what I think will happen. This is how I want to act. This is what I think of parenthood. And then it will just be interesting to compare it to a year from now or whatever.
yeah, and see what I do with it. Like,
Yeah.
do I actually follow through and turn what I'm saying into something that I actually do? Because right, no one cares about what I say. No one cares about what anyone says. I think what people can relate to and would find interesting is seeing what people do, and if that's something they can,
Right.
they get something from that, something that they would want to apply to their own lives. I think then it's a I don't know, like a worthy thing to do, or
Yeah.
there's something to it. It's
Yeah.
not just like, look at me, or I'm interesting. I feel like that's something that I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing or seeing. Like, what does that look like? I've been told from everywhere else that it's like, once you have a kid, you kind of gotta like calm down a little bit, and everything goes into first gear. And it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe it can do like a bunch of things, and you can become even more like excited about doing everything you're passionate about. But I think it's difficult. And maybe that's the thing that's actually true. It's not that it's the right thing. It's that actually that's really hard to do. It's so easy to say, but it's really hard to do, I think, because it's...
Especially the whole, like, if you have a... like, typically one parent will decide to stay home with the kid, right? Just very generally. And I think their life sort of goes on hold while they take care of the kid. I think maybe that's what people mean when they say everything kind of... You're sacrificing, right? Certain career opportunities for yourself. And then I just find it an interesting thing that if you did have two parents who are working and have a kid and decide to go that route, then people almost would feel that the kid is maybe being neglected. So there's this like, well, what's worse, a kid being neglected or the parent not having a sense of purpose in their life once, past the kids?
It's an infinitely complex situation, really I think.
Murky in the middle there.
I think there's also a lot to be said about, like, so even the person who then, whose life doesn't get put on hold, who goes out and works, is encouraged to, well, don't risk it. Like, you're making money here. Like, keep doing that. Like, you can't go out and suddenly do something that isn't a guaranteed paycheck. Like, you got to really take into consideration now you have a family to be responsible for. That's obviously true, but it's also like, then are you then teaching your child to not do what they really want to do because you need to be safe above everything else always? And that taking risks is only something I'm talking about. I don't actually do it. I mean, there's not a right answer, but exactly. I think I'd like to experiment with it a little bit and see, well, maybe there is a way to do that, and that it's really more of a case of like, what's more difficult. Maybe what's more difficult happens to be the right thing, whatever that means for me.
Okay. Yeah. I was already in the interview. I was saying I was cutting the thing together in my head. After certain answers, I was like, oh, cut to 2 years later. See what the answer is. I just find that's what's interesting about it.
Right. It's not interesting by itself.
Well, it's the fact that it'll be a long span of time. And it will be like, I think I said it's almost like an argument in a sense. It's like you're making this hypothesis, then it happens. Then you either prove it or disprove it. And then, some sort of conclusion. And I think the added thing of, we always say when you see yourself on film, it kind of allows you to objectively, if I see myself directing now, I can watch it and I can be more objective about what was good and what was bad.
Yeah.
And I wonder, even with parenting, being able to see yourself across those 2 years. Oh, did I do the things that I wanted? Did I not? Why?
And what did I actually sacrifice, and was it worth it? And
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I don't think you can measure beforehand. I feel like that's only something you can do in hindsight.
Right. It's a little terrifying, yeah.
Yeah. That's again getting to the well, maybe that's just because it's more difficult. And that the unknown risk of that is what is just, oh my God, I don't want to risk that.
Right.
What if there's something there? I feel like
Right.
it's worth looking at.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the thing, to constantly question it at every corner, because I think that is how you become complacent. It's like you're like, oh, I'll stay at home with the kid, and then 18 years go by, and then you're like, oh, fuck. And I think this sort of constantly questioning, what can I be changing? What could we be doing? How could we be not letting yourself get comfortable in a situation like that?
Yeah.
Would, for me, be like a high priority,
Yeah. So I think you start to try and justify that you are the happiest you can be in your current situation.
Right.
Because that makes you feel better.
Right.
And so if your question is instead, well, could I be happier? And there's a yes.
Yeah.
Well, then what could I do to get to that point?
Right. Or where is maybe this is cold of me, but where is your happiness derived from? Because I really don't think it's happy to have your happiness tied to your kids. Like, you should be happy, and then your kids should be like an extra thing on top. That's like, oh, it's amazing that my kids are here. Or it's just another thing that makes my life even better.
Right.
When I get to see them and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
What I don't think is good is sort of you identify yourself, you see yourself as a mother first and foremost. Mm-hmm. I would say, no, but who are you outside of being a mother? And then a mother being a secondary thing almost, I don't know if people probably won't agree with that, but I really think, because otherwise then your kids leave, and then your main purpose, your main identity is sort of like this empty nester syndrome.
I think that's
depressed after their
that's
kids
definitely
leave.
an important thing to keep in mind. But I do think that for a lot of people, that can be what they innately feel like is what makes them the most happy, and what they're most drawn to is the idea of being a mother or being someone who takes care of a family.
Yeah.
And that's their main thing.
Right.
But it's totally true. You gotta think, well, they're not going to be at home forever.
No. You have to make that, and who the fuck am I to speak about this, I get that, but I think you have to, I would think you would have to make that transition at some point. Maybe the wrong thing to say is, oh, the number one priority is being a mother. Maybe it is that at first.
Yeah.
But obviously that must change at some point. Because when your kids are 32,
Yeah.
you can maybe still say that, like, oh, being my mother is my... But it's not, right? It's like, they're living their own lives now. You're living your own life. Like, you must have an identity outside of that. I mean, if you see them 3 weeks a year, it's like, well, what are you for the other 56 weeks?
Yeah. No, I think that's totally true.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't even think it's, specifically to women. It would be, I think if you're a man and you're a stay-at-home father, you would have the exact same issues,
Yeah. So it's like you gotta really think about what is, like, if all else goes,
Yeah.
what is it that you want to do?
Yeah.
Just you.
It reminds me a lot of retirement, where it's like, are you going to just quit your job and then do nothing? Or what is the thing that you want to be? What is your purpose? What is your...
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem to go well when you're just like, okay, I'm going to take a 20-year vacation now. And it's
I think the purpose
it
thing is the
pretty
key.
fucking...
Like, what is your purpose?
Yeah.
And I think your purpose can be to be a stay-at-home father or to be a stay-at-home mother.
But it's temporary.
It evolves.
Yeah.
And it becomes something else.
Yeah, exactly.
And
but I'm saying you could almost miss that evolution.
Yeah.
Because you could be so comfortable in that role.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it is extremely fulfilling.
For sure.
But then at some point, it's like, well, shit. now my kid's gone to college.
Yeah.
What the fuck am I gonna do now? You know? Food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I haven't really thought about.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I've always been very like, well, maybe like I genuinely believe that some people's like, I want to be a filmmaker and a mountain climber and a runner. That's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I want to be a father as well, but that's on a different. I feel like those are very different things. It's not like one's over the other.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's like, I don't know what the word would be for that.
I feel like it's just a sense of like independence.
Maybe. I mean,
Like,
I don't
I'm
want to say
always-
career because that sounds so clinical. To me, that's like my passion.
Like your purpose, your...
But like, I'd say my purpose is also to be a father.
Yeah.
So those are all my purposes.
Yeah.
Maybe it's down to the like, that's that's me and only me. Whereas a father, it's to someone else and with someone else.
That's what
or I'm in
yeah.
a relationship.
Yeah.
I'm with someone, and
Because
that's
you
something
can
is
be a person that really... You could hide as a person with no identity if you only see yourself in the context of a relationship or in the context of a family or in the... I feel like you lose the self a little bit.
yeah.
If everything is tied to who you are with
someone else,
right?
Yeah. So what I was saying was that I think that like I want to be a filmmaker or
Yeah.
climber or whatever.
Yeah.
Someone else's main thing and main passion could be to be a mother.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really thought about the fact that you can't be a mother forever.
No.
You can be motherly,
Right.
but you're not going to have, obviously there's a point when you aren't that.
Yeah.
Like in the same way that you're
Right,
a mother to
right.
a baby and a toddler and
No.
a teenager.
And I think that's you can see some of your friends that have parents that are a little bit too, and it's like they never relinquish the role of I'm your, there was never that sort of separation. And I'm not the one to say if that separation is a good or a bad thing. I personally think it's a good thing to be like independent and separate yourself from your family and
yeah, it's like
see
you
the
need
sort
a
of-
you need a serious balance between the two.
Yeah, yeah. Especially you would start to feel like just all the things that would come along. I don't want to ramble about this too much, but it's interesting. It's interesting. I think those are all things that the documentary can explore.
Yeah.
Which is why it's interesting, people. And you should tune in 10 years when it's done.
Well, I have no idea.
All right.
A forever project.
Forever project. All right. Let us get to... I've got a couple points here. Do you want something...
I'm still thinking about this other thing now.
What other
It's
thing?
Like, no, the whole like being connected to the identity you have that is reliant on someone else and how dangerous that can be.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just keep thinking.
You're just gonna ignore me and think about it while I
come up with the next thing.
Okay, we talked about the format. Okay, I want to talk about let's talk about cryonics.
What the fuck is that?
Okay, so you know what cryogenics is?
No.
Okay, it's essentially freezing somebody.
Oh, okay.
Right, right after they die.
Okay.
So I read this whole article on it yesterday, and there's a whole... It's fascinating to get into like the very specifics of it, but I just thought it was an interesting continuation off of the abortion discussion.
Right.
and sort of brought up a couple more points. So let me just lay it out to you very quickly what this thing is, right?
Okay.
So essentially, like Cryonics is this thing. You in America, you can sign up with these companies that will give you like a bracelet or a necklace or something that gives instructions that right after you die, essentially their company is called, and they're brought in to, I believe it's called like to vitrify you, right? Which is different than freezing. Which is very different than freezing, and the process is super disgusting and involves hooking you up to like blood circulation machines and slowly cooling off your blood over time and injecting yourself with these chemicals that stop your organs from decomposing and all this sort of stuff. And you're very slowly cooled to a temperature which is freezing, but is not the same as freezing something. Because when you freeze something, if I took your body and stuck it in a freezer, the water molecules would create ice crystals, and that would rupture cell membranes and all this stuff because it's so harsh. But when you do it this other way, you're essentially cooling something to that same temperature, but it's never crystallized. You're not getting any crystallized structures. So you're just getting this weird, it's called like an amorphous substance or something. It's the same as glass. It's sort of, glass is neither solid nor liquid. It sort of slows to a point where the molecules won't budge anymore, but it's neither nor.
The idea being that then you could be woken up
right,
in the future,
so the whole thing
when the technology is evolved.
Exactly. So you're kept about, and the hope being that, however long in the future it might take, science will catch up, and they'll either be able to thaw you out, essentially, and put you in a new body, or cure whatever disease you have at the time that is causing your death, or they could somehow like upload you to some sort of virtual whatever system.
Right.
And there's all these questions.
I bet there are.
Well, there's like a whole host of questions. I mean, there's like the religious community is very against this. There's the whole thing that
What do you mean against this? Like they don't
support it at all.
Okay.
And the medical community as a whole is very skeptical and very essentially it has all these things that's like, they're talking about it's very expensive.
Yeah,
people spend a lot of money on it. I couldn't quite understand the article. It sounded like it's up to $200,000, but you can somehow do a life insurance policy with the company, something. I don't fucking know. But it's quite expensive. And it's saying like, oh, we'll wake you up in 1,000 years or something, and it's playing with the idea of mortality and immortality. So I think people, you just bring those things up and people get very like, obviously,
well,
like,
of course,
is this a cult? Is this something, what the fuck is this?
A scam?
Is it a scam? Exactly.
Is it morally right? Even if it could be done, should we do it?
Well, this is the interesting question.
Ethics?
It almost flips, because the analogy that's drawn is that, when someone heart stops beating, we don't that person's dead, sorry. We try to resuscitate them, right? And that is seen as the moral thing to do.
Yeah.
It would be immoral not to do that.
Right.
Not to try everything to save that
It
person's
would be,
life.
I guess, unnatural. Is that the argument then that goes, that it's like unnatural to do the freezing and then
to play with
death?
death.
Like that's like
right. But then they do
too much of an intervention, but we're already doing that.
They have an interesting argument that it's like this. People said the same thing about like organ transplants, that it was something very icky to get someone else's organ, and that it was playing with being God. And now we've got CRISPR, which is like gene manipulation, or gene whatever technology. I don't know enough about it. But then the argument, this is not even an argument, but there was an interesting analogy that said, if a dying kid is on his or her deathbed, and theoretically there's nothing that disproves cryonics to say that sometime in the future, if you're frozen, people will be able to, I don't want to call it resuscitate, I don't know what it's called, wake you up. and you'll be living 1,000, 2,000 years in the future, or you'll be uploaded to some sort of virtual whatever. So in terms of a future potential life, which is what we were talking about with the abortion,
Right.
wouldn't it then be your responsibility that if your kid, for example, is dying, that you do freeze them? Because you say, well, they might be able to be woken up in 1,000, 2,000 years, or 40 years. Who knows? Or is that going too far then?
I have no idea. I mean, I've never really considered the idea of waking up in the future. But I think if we're relating it to the discussion we had about abortion, which for those of you who are listening who don't know that we had that discussion, it's because it's something we put on Patreon specifically, so you can listen to it there.
Yeah.
But the thing I was talking the most about was the idea of the potential of life. That is, if the potential of life is high enough, as in when conception happens, then it's kind of, I feel like, a moral responsibility to not prevent that from becoming.
Right.
Again, I think there's the difference there is that it's not that if you did nothing, like as in you're not going in and removing the life.
Yeah.
It's not that you're going in and you're killing the person who's about to be frozen. Yeah. They're already dead.
Yeah.
So it'd be an active thing to go in and then add this potential future life, which I feel like maybe is what immediately differentiates it from my argument from the previous week.
I see. But you still have to make the decision while they're alive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's
No, I think you could. I think it would be a. That is very interesting though, because like resuscitation or using a defibrillator, whatever they're called,
defibrillator.
It would be seen as immoral not to do those things,
right?
Because they can save someone's life,
right? But I think maybe that's what people would struggle with is the idea. Well, that directly has been proven that can bring someone back to life. Right now,
the cryonics has not been disproven,
right? Which is very different from been proven to work often.
But who's the burden of proof on? Because at some point you have to use the defibrillators or the CPR that has to come about. There has to be test subjects that are willing to do that.
Yeah. But I think that's
the same way.
But it makes a difference though if you're looking at, okay, well, this hasn't been proven not to work.
This hasn't been proven.
It's also never been proven to work. So the freezing, no one's ever been frozen and then come back to life.
Right.
That's never been proven to work. However,
they have taken
defibrillator has worked and does work.
Right.
And for these reasons.
Right.
Right. You're right. The other one hasn't been disproven. It could work.
Yeah.
There's also like, even someone might say it's highly likely that it'll work.
Yeah.
Still different because it hasn't shown. I mean, it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So that's that. I mean,
but it's still potential. We're talking about potential.
Well, we're not just talking about potential. We're talking about. Well, I mean, they're obviously. Would you agree that they're different?
That
it's like doing CPR on someone will potentially save their life. It's not for sure. It's not like a button where it's yes or no. In the same way as freezing someone, it's definitely potential. But I think one happens very often. You can show that it works on this person, works on this person, works on this person. Whereas the other one, it just doesn't have those examples yet. It can't. That's why it can't. That's why it's interesting. That's why it's something that people maybe are split on. I think it's obviously different, even if there's a potential in both situations.
Yeah, I think it's different, but you're still left with the question. It doesn't answer the question of is it moral? If you think there's a small percentage chance that somebody would survive, essentially, it would be an argument of like, should you always do everything you possibly can to save someone's life?
Right.
Is life always the end goal? Is life always going to trump any other question? Which I think goes back to the cluster of cells that could potentially turn into a baby.
Yeah, no, but I feel like maybe you're getting too hung up on this idea. As long as there's potential, then it means that you have to do anything possible, and that it's all about if there's potential, yes or no. I think it is that the knowledge of where that will likely lead to, as in a cell, as in an egg that's been fertilized, will 9 out of 10 times become a human baby who becomes a human.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. You can point to those numbers and you can see that happens. But freezing someone and then bringing them back to life has never happened. It's all hypothetical. It's all theory.
Right.
So that...
what if it was fact?
Well, yeah. Then I think that's a serious thing where it's like, well, then you're denying that person their future life if you don't do it. And then it becomes a moral thing.
Right.
I mean, it was just like...
But then you freeze everybody. If it was proven...
If it were a fact, you can see how that changes it, right? I mean, if you knew just for yourself.
I would still think there's a question. I mean, like, do you...
Oh, for sure.
Is life really... It's the same as, like... We do have instances where people say, do not resuscitate.
Yeah.
I'm terminally ill.
No, I definitely...
Do not resuscitate me.
I'm not saying they're the same if it's a fact. I'm just saying that then it's definitely something you can actually, like, compare the two, right? Because then there's legitimate potential of future life proven. It's a fact that will happen.
Right.
They will become alive again.
Right.
But it's like, and then you get into the morals of it. Like, well, they've already lived their life. Why should they live again? Or they die. That's a natural thing. Like, you're then going in and actively changing something. Whereas with the birth, it's you're letting it happen as it is.
But that even gets to the question of what is natural. Is me taking your kidney out and using it for myself natural? Kind of. We evolved to be able to do it.
Yeah.
People will say, well, that's not very natural. That's playing God. And it's like, when does something move from...
Yeah, that's a good question. When does something move from being natural to being more unnatural than natural?
Right.
So I think if it can be done, it's in some way natural, right? It's not breaking the laws of nature.
Or if you could be immortal.
Unnatural would really be breaking the laws of nature. So if it can be done, it's by definition natural, I guess.
Right.
But then maybe that's not the question. It's more of like, I think moral, right? A moral question.
I don't know what kind of a question. I mean, what's the kind of question where it would be like, if you could live forever on a hard drive, would you do it?
Yeah.
What is this highbrow thing about death,
I don't know.
Or this, like, if you're trying to... Because so many classic ancient stories have to do with the idea of immortality.
Yeah.
Like, I think the first, like, the Epic of Gilgamesh, right, is, like... These all sort of deal with this idea of, like, somebody trying... having hubris, trying to become immortal, to become a god, essentially. And that always leads to their downfall.
Yeah.
Right? So it's something in our culture or in our... whatever you call it, collective consciousness is a bad thing to try to cheat death. But it is, like, what if it was possible? What if it was, we just upload your hard drive, your brain into a hard drive?
If it suddenly happened, I think there'd be a lot of...
And you can choose to kill yourself at some point if it ever becomes too much.
Chaos.
It would...
yeah.
And then it's also the question of, like,
about.
if you are immortal and you do live on a hard drive, then what's the point of life?
I think that's probably where
Do you program struggle into the hard drive? Do you program
right
things that go wrong into the hard drive? Because
that's
it can't
the
be
part where I'd almost be like, that's a good thing to talk about, because that's when I think the purpose of life is that we die, in my opinion, and that makes it important,
right?
And that gives it meaning, and that gives it context, and that makes it something to be lived. But that if you remove that, or if you make that something that you have to program, as in someone else has to go in and write it, that kind of removes the meaning a little bit, because it's not...
It removes everything almost.
Yeah.
Because also, I was just thinking, like, let's say you were immortal, right? And the only way you could die is via an accident.
Yeah, like an elf from Lord of the Rings.
Like an elf? Is that...
I've always wondered this. I could probably easily find it out. But elves are immortal, but they can die in battle. So then I'm like, why do they ever fight?
That's my question. Why would you do anything? Because I think partially what it allows us to take risk is to accept that we're going to die one day.
Yeah.
So in your
it gives
head,
everything
you're like,
meaning.
Well, I could die at any point. I'd rather climb this mountain and try.
Or there will be a point where I for sure can't.
But if you were immortal and you couldn't die, you would never never climb a mountain.
There would be never any point where you're like, it's now or never.
Yeah.
It's I could always do it tomorrow. I could always do it later. I could always do it in a million years.
If I don't do it, I will never die. If I do it, I might not exist anymore. You would never choose the potential, like, existential death over, well, I could just go on forever.
Yeah, this is one of the main things I feel like I struggle to understand with religion and things like afterlife. And that, to me, that in a lot of ways removes the urgency of the life that we know to be happening right now.
Right.
I don't think anyone, some people might say, I know there's a God and I know there's an afterlife.
But everyone questions it deep down.
But they don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
they think.
Yeah.
I mean, in the same way that I think there's not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have, I think that's what's happening. But it's like, I feel like that removes a little bit of the point of living right now. It's like, oh, well, you're just going to go to a better place after you've died.
Yeah.
For eternity.
Yeah. But that's the question.
It's
right?
like, well, why aren't you then there? Like, why is the point not to get there? I mean, and then there's a lot of answers to that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
There's good answers to that.
Are there?
Why? Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be speaking for anyone who's religious. I don't understand it, and I've yet to be convinced of why that is I don't know what the right word would be, better or smarter or more moral way of thinking. But I feel like we know that this is real and that this is our life and that for sure we are alive right now.
Yeah.
I mean, without counting the fact that we can't disprove that we're not in a simulation. You can't disprove,
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
Let's act as if this is all there is and make the most of it.
But doesn't the way they act, I mean, the way a religious person acts, I would be like, I just don't buy it. I don't buy that 100% you think there's a heaven.
I definitely think some people do. I don't think the majority of people do.
Because if you thought that, it would be the most, if you were 100% sure that there was a heaven, I think it would be such a radical, like you would live your life in such a radical way. Because you're like, oh, well, if anything happens, guaranteed. I believe in Christ.
Well, like a jihadist terrorist.
Yeah, or like
would
whatever.
you say they're radical enough to think that 100% they're going to paradise?
And they kill themselves.
So they kill themselves. So you can kind of look at them and you can say, I feel like he 100% believed it.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I think that is the consequence of 100% believing it.
I kind of, that's what I was getting at a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like I can't quite understand why, if you're saying that that's what comes after, then why are you not doing everything you can to get there?
Right.
So in a way, it's a little hypocritical, I think,
but
to be saying that, but then also be saying that, like, why is it then sad when people die and things like
exactly.
that?
It raises a whole bunch of questions. But the Cryonics article also had this interesting point that it was for the atheist. The writer is an atheist.
Oh.
And he said for him, because he ended up signing up for this program after doing all the research and everything. Under the idea that he kind of draws this analogy to, like, you're on an airplane and the pilot gets on the thing and says, oh, ladies and gentlemen, we are gonna crash in 15 minutes. There's no chance of survival, but there will be no pain in your death, blah blah blah. We happen to be transporting a bunch of experimental parachutes. There's enough for everybody on board. If you want one, go talk to the flight attendant. She'll give you one. We don't know if they'll work, and we don't know where you'll land, and we don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
So you can take one of those, or you can sit on a plane and die. That's the analogy, right? And it's like, well, who wouldn't at least try the parachute then? You'd rather err on the side of
if
safety.
you can afford it.
If you can afford it. Right. And that's what I didn't quite understand in the article, because he was saying it actually isn't that expensive. So I don't know, but they threw out $200,000 as a cost.
That's pretty expensive.
Right, but I think a lot of it's transportation and stuff, so I wonder if there's a certain way to essentially, I don't fucking know.
So do they have, like, huge halls filled with
Well, not very many people have done it.
Deep frozen people? Oh.
You know, it's not like there's warehouses full. There's, like,
it's not like in the Matrix where you got, like, towers of people.
I mean, that's what it's, they showed the vats. There are these, liquid nitrogen vats.
And the capacity?
Huh?
Do they have a lot of capacity, or are they...
Yeah, and I think it's all set up, and that's why it's partially expensive, is because they need a massive reserve of money, obviously, in case anything ever happens to the company. Because there were companies in the past where people had been frozen, but then the company went bankrupt, and then it's like, well, what happens to the bodies? Where there's a bunch of ifs. So anyways, the interesting part was that he's an atheist, and he said to him, that's the first time he could think a little bit like someone who believes in heaven.
Right.
He said, I can have a little bit of hope when I die.
Right.
Like, just maybe
Yeah.
somebody, I wake up, to me it'll feel like 2 seconds later, and they've been able to cure my cancer, and they've uploaded me to this network, and I'm living forever.
In a virtual world where there's no pain and suffering, so it's like heaven.
I don't know
So maybe is that proof of an afterlife?
Wouldn't that be heaven? If we could upload our minds to a hard drive that you had complete control over. What if I could even upload, you could have a little chip that's me, and then I say, okay, I want Mads and my mom and this person and that person in my hard drive, and they're perfect. We'll just copy their consciousness and put it in yours. But you have a different, it's not like we all exist on the same thing. Maybe we all just pick and choose, and it's just your own head, but it's a perfect copied consciousnesses of other people. I don't know, this is getting too far.
No. The copy that goes into your mom's hard drive is one where you are the perfect son who spends all your time with her, and that makes her super happy. But in my hard drive, you are, there just as much as I want you to be, but not all the time.
Right.
And in another hard drive, you are doing.
And can you?
Everyone
decide,
has the perfect version of you,
the
way that they want.
Struggle. There's a little struggle dial, with 0 to 10, and you decide in your world.
I need a little struggle to appreciate my heaven.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna dial it up a little.
I mean, it's like, why wouldn't you do it if your main goal is just surviving? Right. But there is a huge.
But that's what I was getting at. This idea that, okay, well, let's say there is this potential for a future life or for an afterlife.
Yeah.
It has to remove a little bit of the urgency from right now. Just the thought, even if it's a distant thought, it's going to be it's going to be a very small response.
Right.
But it has to, I feel like one equals the other.
I think because there's still doubt. That's the thing.
I'm not saying it removes. I'm saying just a tiny bit. If it's a tiny little hope in the future that there maybe is an afterlife, there's a tiny bit of relief that, okay, this isn't it.
Right.
I mean, it might make one little decision a little easier for you to say, I'm not going to risk that today because maybe.
I see.
I'm going to do everything else though. But
I see.
If there's a definitely an afterlife, that's definitely happening. And that's going to be fucking amazing. Definitely going to have a big effect on your life, and you might not do crazy things, or like crazy things isn't the goal, but I mean, like, you're not going to be acting as if this is it.
I don't know.
It's got to have an effect.
What if we had a hard drive and I was like, oh, it's a thing, right? It would still feel different than life, I feel like, because I would be like, oh, I'm about to go into this.
I would know that I'm not going to die.
Non-reality. But you are going to die.
To me, the idea of death is such a huge motivation.
Yeah.
It's such a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I know for sure, to the extent that I can know anything, that I'm not going to exist at one point.
Right.
And on that day, will I be thinking, I wish I had done that. I wish I had done that. I wish I had done that.
Yeah.
Or I wish I hadn't done that.
Right.
I hadn't done that.
Right.
That's a massive part of my life, is thinking about that. Not in like a psycho way, but isn't it like, do I actually want to do this right now? I imagine that. And it makes it easier to make a decision.
But even the regret, you couldn't have a regret in an immortal life. I wish I would have. Oh, I can. I guess I will at some point.
Yeah, but I feel like I wouldn't.
I agree. I
don't know if
think
I'd
it would
want
take a
that.
lot away, but it's very hard to make a decision, because on the one hand, you seem to be glorifying death, and it's like is life better than death? Yeah. Or I guess
life better than death, but life without death is nothing.
But life without death is nothing. Is it? Yeah. Or
That's what
does
we were
death,
saying, right?
Does death become something more a choice? You have these noble 500-year-old people who say, and that's it. And now I'm going to die.
I'm sure you would.
Life without death. That sounds very... It is like a scary thought.
It on the surface, you'd be like, yeah, I'm afraid of dying.
Right.
Who isn't?
Right.
So I'd want to avoid it. But that's not thinking about all the things that does for you.
Right.
And all the things it puts into context and all the things it's kind of all about that. It's like you have this amount of time.
Right.
What are you going to do with it?
Right.
Action.
That's the thing. And but
if you take it away, it's like just sits back.
right. And what you might say is, "Oh, I'll just freeze myself just to make sure." Right? And then I'll just kill myself if I ever want to die, if death still needs to be a part of my life. Right? How would you ever decide when to kill yourself then?
I don't know.
It would be... should be confronted with you have to make the decision when you die. It's no longer nature.
It's like it's that
Then
unknown.
it would suddenly be like
well.
a sad, like suicidal thing that people would have to go through. Or like a...
Well, you wouldn't kill yourself if you're happy. So you'd have to become unhappy to kill yourself.
Right. Or you've lived all there is to live, but then it would be like, well, is there ever all
That'd
there is
also
to
be impossible,
lived?
right? Yeah.
Huh. Skip up.
This episode has been sponsored by...
I forget the company's name.
Well, you just had it.
It's called Cryonics.
Sponsored by Cryonics.
So Cryonics is the not the act of, but the whatever field of freezing bodies.
Right.
Cryogenics is the field of just dealing with like cold things.
Oh, right.
Right.
Okay.
Something like that. Like on the cryogenics site,
They
it
probably
says,
have
we are not associated with cryonics.
Right.
We want to make it very clear that the field of cryogenics does not support this specific subset. Yeah, it's a much debated thing, apparently, in the scientific community.
Well, I think we can agree,
Right?
Because
what also
clearly
was
it raises
interesting,
a lot of questions.
What also was interesting was I learned that, and I kind of knew this, but when you have a hard drive, they were comparing a hard drive to a brain, and it's like when you overwrite a hard drive, what it does is basically takes a bunch of zeros, and it will write over whatever information was on the hard drive before, which is in binary zeros and ones, right? So instead of 001, 01, 0, you now have all zeros. Then on a hard drive, you can actually, like an expert can tell a zero that was once a zero or a zero that was once a one. So you have these like multi-pass encryption things where they use random binary code and write over it like multiple times. But they were comparing how like somebody doing forensics on a hard drive being able to figure that out. Would humans in the future be able to take a brain that has been slightly damaged, which this process of freezing somebody, it does damage the brain a little bit. Would they be able to say, oh, well, it's this now, but we can tell this is a nerve that used to be this? And can they build your self back together in a sense? Because there's also this interesting thing of like, they said short-term memories are based on the electricity in your brain, the electrical activity in your brain, but long-term memories become parts of the structure of your brain.
Yeah, it physically changes the structure.
So when you woke up 1,000 years later, you wouldn't remember your short-term memories, but you would still have your personality. You would have all the things that make you in the long term would still be there, which I found fascinating. So you just wake up and be like super confused.
Imagine what a trip that would be to wake up in 1,000 years. And
he was
like,
describing
welcome.
Just opening up his eyes and like, no way.
Well, he wouldn't even know that, would he? If he didn't have short term, or I guess if he did
you
signed up to it when he was young enough, and it became a deep memory, ingrained in the physical structure of his
you're
brain.
Thinking about it though, but that was the other interesting thing, is that you can't, because essentially I didn't know this either. It's like as soon as you die, all this shit happens in your body to start breaking down your organs, your brain, whatever, all this kind of stuff happens. And after 4 to 5 minutes, you're considered brain dead, right? But then it would take
yeah, it's different for different parts of the body.
Yeah, and it would take up to like this is obviously debated, but there's this thing called information death, at which point you could no longer retrieve information from the brain, which
How long
happens
is that?
a couple hours to a day.
Wow.
Which means even though, if I had a stroke here and died and someone found me 2 hours later and I was part of this system, they would still freeze me. But it would be
Debatable whether or not it would still be there.
And there's a weird, in my head, I was just thinking like, yeah, well, you're taking $200,000 from the guy. It's like, if you died and freaking whatever terrible thing had happened and your brain's, they're still going to be like, oh, but there might be a chance. Taylor, we should still freeze him because there might still be a chance in the future they might come up with the technology like with the hard drive where, yeah, his brain's pretty fucked, but maybe we can do this reverse engineering sort of thing. But the problem is that you can't opt to be frozen from being alive.
Oh, you can't kill yourself.
You can't kill yourself in America and,
right.
Therefore be frozen. So it's like you have to die naturally and then they can come in. And you have to have a DNR then as well because otherwise they'll try to resuscitate you for 4 to 5 minutes or whatever.
You'd have to be seriously fucked up to believe in something enough that you would kill yourself now on something that someone's never shown to be true but theoretically should work.
Theoretically should work, but killing yourself now would give you the highest, it would give me a better chance.
Right, that's what I mean.
Than
You'd
it would
have
you.
to seriously
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. But if I don't know, you hear stories of people who seem like
that's like
days
a
away
radical.
from death, it'd be like, that's when you do it.
Right. Okay, I guess.
And
I guess you wouldn't be
people
like
euthanize themselves as well.
mid-20s super healthy.
No,
risk it all
No.
on that being true.
No. It would be like, euthanizing plus you want to be preserved. I had one other thing. Oh, I thought this was fascinating too, is the concept of the word death.
Yeah.
Is because of that thing, like our technology has essentially allowed us to, there are these, your heart could stop beating, but if you got resuscitated, you didn't die.
Okay.
Something else happened, right?
Yeah.
But if that had happened 70 years ago and we didn't know about CPR and whatever, you would be dead.
Yeah.
So it's this like, at what point are you, I think they called it doomed in the article or whatever. And that area is constantly increasing as technology gets better and better. We're able to bring people back from worse and worse situations where you would have been doomed in the past, but you no longer are. And then this cryonics thing suddenly becomes this thing of like, well, are you dead
at all?
If it gets proven later that we can bring people back this way, then you're not dead. Even a day after your heart stopped working, if they are able to retrieve that information from the brain.
In 1,000 years.
Then you're in that same period the guy who was dead for 20 seconds but got resuscitated.
Yeah. Does that make you like 1,078 years old?
No, I don't fucking know. I don't know. But it's super fascinating. And they did do they did it with the kidney. Well, apparently we do this all the time, especially for like organ stuff where we need to transport them over.
Right, yeah. So that's interesting. What evidence is there that it could work?
Right, so there's that. They've done it with a rabbit kidney where they put the kidney back in the rabbit then.
How long?
Well, they froze it completely and then brought it back.
So just completely, and then it doesn't change over time once it's gotten to that final state.
It's kept in liquid nitrogen.
So once it's there,
it
doesn't matter if it's a minute or if it's 1,000 years. It's not going to change.
No.
And it worked.
Because it's this thing, and it worked, yeah.
Fuck.
And they also did it with a rabbit brain that they didn't put back into the rabbit, but they said that the brain's structure worked as you would expect it to work. I don't know what that meant. But essentially it was very good proof that you were able to have something functioning. The question, of course, being, well, how much does technology need to advance before we can?
That's the if.
Right.
So the if isn't if the freezing works, that works.
But the freezing also damages things, so they're getting better at it. This whole thing of not creating any crystalline structures or whatever for don't freeze the water in your body.
Yeah.
They kind of described it as like when you put antifreeze in a car. Like it prevents the windshield wiper fluid from freezing. It's that sort of, but it can still go to that temperature. What were you saying?
I was saying that the focus or the question lies more in, well, would we ever be able to reach a point?
Would we ever be able to
where
reach a
we
point?
Could?
Would people even care
Yeah.
to resuscitate you if we got to that point?
Right, yeah.
And there's a couple other ifs. But again, those people will say, well, I'm willing to take those ifs.
Right,
because
it's a nothing or that.
Yeah.
For a lot of
It's
money.
the parachute or I just sit in the plane.
And if you happen to have the $200,000 on you in the plane.
Right. Yeah.
That you then don't give to people who are actually alive and who might need it.
Yeah, that was another argument people said. Oh, you could save somebody with that money. But then it began this thing of like, well, I mean, everything in life then is you could have spent that money on helping somebody.
Yeah. That is an interesting point.
What?
Like, okay, you're keeping $2,500 for yourself on something that hasn't been proven to ever work, but might. Or you give it to Children's
But it'd be the
Hospital.
same as if I'm the first person of a heart transplant. Mm-hmm. People say, well, you could give your money to somebody who guaranteed is to survive instead of you just fucking around with an experiment that we know nothing about.
Right.
You would now say, that was good that guy decided to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Damn it.
But we'll see. I'm very equipped just because I literally read that article yesterday. Good article. Wait But Why, Tim Urban. Go check him out. There's also little stick figure drawings in there, so it's fun for everybody. All right. Is there anything else? What's the time?
That's a good time.
1:13. That's good. We'll see you next week on Burning
Boat
Business.